Thank you, John. Thank you, Cookie. Can you guys hear me over the doors?
Yes.
The doors, blowing through the doors.
That's good karma. That's good karma.
Good.
That's right.
Light on fire.
That's right. Break on through. To the other side, where Democrats control the House of Representatives.
Here's your slogan for Congress: people are strange.
You're fired. You were good there for a while. So thank you all. This is stop 92 on our tour of the district this week. We've been having an incredibly exciting and intense time. There's been some drama on the way to some of these meetings. A few days ago, I was driving to a forum and I see a text message from my former chief of staff at the State Department, and she has copied and forwarded to me that text that went out in Hawaii.
Yeah.
You guys know what I'm talking about. Missiles incoming with an OMG WTF. And I almost drove off the road. And I missed my turn, and I'm 10 minutes late for my forum, because for a while we thought this was real. And I guess the lesson is, don't look at your text messages while driving while Donald Trump is president. Because you never know what's going to happen. So let me say a few words about myself and my motivation. Some of you guys have seen me before. You've heard the story that I tell about when I was a little kid in Poland, which is where I grew up until age 6. And I've got a lot of memories from that time living in a communist country. Most of them are pretty happy. I was a little child. I wasn't thinking about politics. But some of them were a little bit more interesting. So I've been telling the story of remembering my mother pushing a big wad of cash across a table into the hands of a corrupt official in our little town because she wanted to buy a passport so that we could come to America. And I remember how that made me feel even as a little kid, that there was something really creepy about this. Like we were living in a country, and we were, where some people had all the power and they could kick the crap out of people who had no power, which was most of us, and there was nothing we could do about it. And I came from that to this, to New Jersey, grew up in Princeton, went to Princeton High. We used to get our butts kicked in baseball by Montgomery High in Hillsborough. I still resent that. And I had, your basic, normal New Jersey childhood. Except that I knew, even then, because of my experience, that all this stuff that we think of as normal in America is actually really, really rare in this world. It's incredibly fragile. It's something that we can lose if we don't fight for it, if we don't defend it every single day. And so much of my life has been spent with that lesson in mind. I was a human rights activist for many years, working for Human Rights Watch, trying to make sure that we kept our civil liberties here in the United States, and helping people around the world who are struggling with the same rights that we enjoy. For the last 4 years, I was working for President Obama as his Assistant Secretary of State for democracy, human rights, and labor. What does that mean? We're trying to get people out of prison in dictatorships around the world. We were standing up for women's rights in Saudi Arabia, in Afghanistan, in China, supporting some incredible activists in these countries who their courage is something that I can barely even imagine, given how much they risk for basic human dignity. Standing up to dictators like Putin and Kim Jong-un. I was the guy in charge of the sanctions that Putin got so upset about. And so you can either give me credit for doing the right thing or blame me for everything that's gone wrong in the last year. So that's what I was doing. And as an immigrant kid, having that job representing our country with the flag of the United States behind me, I can't tell you how proud that made me. And then the election happened. And I don't think I need to tell you how I felt, because I'm sure you all felt the same way. And I decided, Trump may have won that election, but we cannot allow him to win the argument about who we are as a country, about who we are as a people. And so here I am. I'm a guy who was hired by Obama, fired by Trump, and now I'm fired up to do something about it by helping us take back the United States Congress from the Democratic Party. I don't think we are what Donald Trump thinks we are. I don't think we are what he is trying to make us. We're not a country that calls the press the enemy of the people. We're not a country where we can't distinguish between white supremacists and the patriotic Americans who protest against them. We're not a country that sends federal agents after little girls in our hospital bed because her parents are undocumented, or that turns people away from our shores, or sends them home after living in this country, raising their families, starting businesses, having children, because they come from countries that Donald Trump thinks are shitholes. That's not who we are as a people. And we know here in New Jersey, even if we don't fall into any of the categories that Trump is going after, we know that these aren't just abstract principles. We know that if you go after the press, if you go after truth, if you go after facts, it's a very short distance from that to Republicans in Congress foisting this tax bill that is making everybody's life harder here in New Jersey on us, and saying with a straight face, it's not going to add to the deficit. It's going to cut everybody's taxes. Don't worry. It's designed to help the middle class, not the rich. If you can convince 20 or 30% of the people to ignore facts, eventually you can say whatever you want, and anything can happen in this country. We begin to resemble the places that I thought were our adversaries when I was working for the State Department. I don't want that ever to happen here. I don't want anyone in this country to feel the way I did as a 5-year-old kid living in a communist country all those years ago. So that's why I'm running. I'm running to fight for our country. I'm running to fight for our values. I'm running to fight for our state and for the people of this district. Now, I'm not the only one who's running on the Democratic side, as you all know. I sometimes refer to it as 7 brides for the 7th district. So you guys all have a choice to make. And I know it's not necessarily an easy choice, because I bet you any of the other people running in the Democratic primary could stand up here and say, oh, I agree with everything Tom said, times 2. We basically share the same values. So what's the difference? It is time at this point, we have to make a choice, so we have to talk about distinctions. And I would point to several, maybe 3.5. Number 1, we got to win. Or none of these issues that we all care so passionately about are going to matter. We got to beat Leonard Lance. And I think I'm the best able to do that, in part because of the stuff that I've done over my lifetime. I'm able to attract a lot of national attention and support to our race in CD7. Maybe we can talk more about the practicalities of that when we have our conversation. That is essential. We cannot win if we don't nominate a candidate who can do that. Number 2, I think because of the work I've done and the experience that I've had, I think that I can speak persuasively to people on different sides of the political spectrum in this district. We know this is a politically diverse district. It's one that can go either way. We've got progressive voters in this district who are so angry at Trump and want to do something about it and want profound change in this country. We have more moderate voters and even Republican voters who don't like what they see happening in Washington, but it's not going to be easy for them to cross over. We know it's very hard as committed Democrats who's voted one way all their life. I voted Democrat all my life. It would be hard for me, even if a Democratic president was just like Donald Trump, to vote for the other side. We're going to need a candidate who can speak to people who are on the fence, who are potential Democratic voters, but who need to be reassured. So I've been a human rights activist. I've fought for progressive causes, for women's rights, for LGBT rights, for civil liberties, civil rights in this country. I have a story to tell the progressive voters that I think they will be excited by, about victories that I have won on issues they care about. But I've also worked on national security. I've worked for 2 presidents. I think I know how to talk about issues in ways that appeal to people on both sides, because I had to do it under Republican administrations in Washington, fighting for the progressive goals that I believe in. I firmly believe, for example, that we as Democrats, we don't win when we focus on identity. We win when we focus on ideas, when we focus on issues. We win when we address everybody as an American, as an American who loves his or her country and wants it to be better. We win when we focus on unifying issues. And I think the Republicans have given us every opportunity to do that in this election. Because think about it. Our party, we've always been the party that stands up for people without power in America. We can also now say we're the party of fiscal responsibility after this tax bill. We're the party of patriotism in America, the party that stands up to our adversaries around the world. We're the party of family values after the monster they ran in Alabama. We're the party of law enforcement after Donald Trump attacked the FBI. We're the party of science. We're the party that does math. We have a message, if we play this right, that can appeal to people on all sides, and that's what I intend to do. Finally, if I can earn your support, and I'm lucky enough to be elected, I can hit the ground running in the Congress. It is not easy to stand out as one of 435 members of the House of Representatives when you're a freshman. But I've been there. I've worked with Republicans and Democrats to pass legislation. I like to laugh about how I've probably contributed to the passage of more major bills in the U.S. Congress than Leonard Lance has. And I'm not a congressman. And I'm grateful to Leonard for being that ineffectual, because I don't think we would like the bills that he would pass. And I think this is important because we all know this is a moment of crisis. We don't have time to elect somebody who's going to have a 5 or 10 year learning curve. We've got to take the fight to Trump now. We've got to hold the White House accountable, and we've got to find a way to get reasonable Democrats and Republicans in the Congress to work together on issues like taxes and infrastructure and health care, the issues that affect people in this district, and to do it effectively despite what is coming at them every single day from the White House. And I can be a leader from day one in doing that. And then finally, I promised you 3.5 reasons. So the last half, I'm Donald Trump's worst nightmare, because there's no way in hell he's ever going to come up with a rhyme for my last name. And remember Linda Stender, Big Spender? I've talked to her about that. She saw me and said, "Oh, you're great. They'll never come up with a line like that for you. Except send Malinowski to the house key, because Leonard Lance has had his chance." So I'll close on that. I'd like to invite you guys to share any concerns that you have, to ask me questions, but in particular, if you have any concerns about me, if you have any doubts, if there's something that I should address, because I want to persuade you if you're not persuaded, and it's best to, I think, have it all out and put the toughest questions on the table. So I would love to hear. I'd love to hear someone say, "That was great, I'm for you." But I'd love to hear if you have any concerns that I should address, or any questions on issues that I wasn't able to bring up in the time that I had. So the floor is yours.
The tax bill is obviously going to be on the front burner. By November, tax returns will be due, tax years for the club. Mr. Lance is going to get up there after Labor Day and say, I voted against it, I'm fighting for you. How do you counter his renegade, fighting for you, I'm not a Tony? How do you fight that?
Yeah.
Not fighting well.
So, well, there you go. So we all know that they gave him permission to vote that way. We all know that the most important vote that any member of Congress takes is the very first vote that they cast for the Speaker of the House of Representatives, deciding the leadership of the House. Because it's the leadership of the House that will write an important bill like the tax bill and jam it through no matter what. But you know what? I'll tell that story, but I think that the real argument is even simpler. The real argument is, it passed. The tax bill was adopted. It is hurting us now. It was designed to hurt states like this, where we choose to have better schools, better services, better infrastructure. It has happened. It doesn't matter whether he voted for it or against it. We want to change this. We want to repeal and replace this tax bill. Does anybody believe that we can do that by sending Leonard Lance, or the same congressman, back to the same Congress to cast the same ineffectual vote? Obviously not. Even if you're a friend of Leonard's, even if you believe that he sincerely did everything in his power to stop that bill from passing, it passed. And if we want to change that, we have to change the Congress, and you can't change the Congress without changing the Congress. And I think people are smart in this district. I know they are, and they're going to understand that. And I also think if the election were next week, that would be the first most important, second most important, third most important issue on people's minds. And I think we would win with a simple, clear message on that issue.
Healthcare and the cost of that have been a huge problem. We pay a tremendous amount of money for substandard health, which we're privately insured.
Yeah.
My patients come in and they pay very large deductibles, co-pays. It seems to me as if there's an inequity here, and that's the problem. Some of us are getting good health care, good benefits. We may have been denied before. A lot of us are getting very bad benefits and very high cost. The insurance companies own. How do you see that? Do you feel that a Medicare model would be more appropriate with a single payer and a little bit less red tape?
Yeah. A little less red tape we can all agree to, right? And that's one of the many things that people who are looking to cut costs focus on. But let me take it back to the bigger picture. Affordability of healthcare is, I would say, before the tax bill passed, I would have said that is the number one issue in this district. I'm on Obamacare myself because I'm an unemployed vagabond congressional candidate right now. And I'm actually a classic example in a strange way of why the Affordable Care Act is actually important to our economy. Because I'm a guy who, for many years, I worked for big established organizations, like the State Department, for example. I didn't have to worry about health care. I had an excellent employer-provided health care. And then I decided to do something risky, something entrepreneurial, running for Congress. But it's really very much like what we want people to take risks on in this economy. Leave the big company you're working on, start a business of your own, pursue an invention, pursue an idea. And the reason we needed something like the Affordable Care Act, one reason, is so that people could feel secure enough to do that without losing their health care. The problem is it's too expensive. I'm one of those people with huge deductible. So I'm paying a lot for something that I'm not going to use unless, God forbid, something really catastrophic happens to me. It's not great. I don't love it. My approach, though, would have been not to scrap the whole darn thing, but to build on it. Because we know one reason for the high deductibles and the rising premiums is because Congress has been playing games with us year after year after year, and insurance companies obviously get scared off. And of course, the more people they kick off healthcare, the fewer healthy people are insured, the more costs are going to rise for all of us. So part of the equation has got to be to shore up and improve the Affordable Care Act. If I could, one way I would do it is by adding a public option, so that people could buy into Medicare. I don't think I would scrap the whole system in the way that Senator Sanders is proposing, because I don't think, 160 million of us have employer-provided health care. I don't think those people are going to want to risk losing that for something uncertain. But I wouldn't want people to be able to buy into Medicare if they're like me, and they don't have employer-provided care. And then finally, are you a physician?
I'm an audiologist. I'm a medical.
Yeah. So as you know better than any of us, the most complicated and the most important part of this is how do you control the cost of the care itself in a way that still maintains the quality of care that we demand in America and will always demand in America. And here I will put in another plug for the Affordable Care Act, because I don't know the answer to that question. I would not trust the Congress to come up with the answer to that question, even if everybody in the Congress was just as smart and handsome as me. But what the Affordable Care Act did was to create the possibility for experimentation. It created the possibility for states, for hospitals, for groups of hospitals to experiment with different ways of paying for health care. Some of which are going to work, some of which are not going to work. But we're going to learn from that to come up with better and better ways of doing it. So that's another reason why I would start with what we achieved under President Obama and try to improve it, rather than continue to play the games and do it all.
Get rubbing him the right way, like that, whatever it is.
I can repeat it if you like.
Okay. And so I'm wondering, going forward when you have debates or other forums, how will you talk about the social movement, the Me Too movement? How do you plan to debate women who demonstrates really power very well articulated, and knowing that people seems to be wanting to elect a woman through power at this point. And the last question is, have you looked at all of the studies that maybe you're looking at? I don't know. Like frankly, I really, I'm for you. I like what you have to say, and I like the fact that you have policy experience, and I like the fact that you will probably be able to get the support of the national office. But, given what's going on now, I'm thinking, well, maybe he's got something in his pocket that's going to come out, and, this whole thing could be, I'm just being honest, you asked me to find out. So, I'm just throwing that out there. I don't expect you to answer.
Well, I'm going to answer it. Did you guys hear the question?
No.
So, number one, the Me Too movement. How do I feel about that? How do I feel about the very passionate sentiment, and I would add legitimate sentiment, to have more women running for Congress, more women in positions of power? How do I address that concern, which I absolutely am hearing from many, many people, especially when there is not just one, but two very strong women still in the race on the Democratic side. Is that a fair summary? Oh, and can I reassure you that I don't have skeletons in my closet? So, where to start? Let me start with the last part. And obviously, this isn't an easy question for a white dude like me to handle. But I'll start with the fact that I have a 23-year-old daughter, Emily, who I love deeply. When she was in college, at Colby College in Maine, she helped lead the movement at that college against sexual assault. And I cannot tell you how much it means to me to have her respect and to be not just a good father for her, but a good model of a good man to her. And I've always tried to be. All I can say is I've always tried to be. And maybe this isn't a fully satisfying answer to you, but I have been vetted many times before. I was confirmed by the U.S. Senate from my last job, and boy, they certainly do a number on you in terms of investigating every possible thing, whether it's that or any other horrible thing I might have done in the past. So that's the first part. The second part, even if I'm a good guy, we need more women in politics. We need more women in the Congress. And this is awkward because I agree with that. And I know I can't contribute to that trend. I'm willing to make a lot of changes in my life to be a member of Congress, but there are limits. So if there is a woman or a man in this room or in this district for whom that is the number one priority, then I respect that, and obviously I'm not your gal. But I would say that if you're willing to overlook my obvious personal failing, and at the very least I can promise you that you will have a member of Congress who has stood up all his life for women's rights. I mentioned a little bit in my opening remarks. That was part of my job at the State Department, not just because I had to do it, but because I was passionate about it. I'm not the woman in this race, but I'm the only candidate in this race who's gone head-to-head with the president of Afghanistan to tell him, you do not compromise women's rights, no matter what happens in this country. Or who's gone toe-to-toe with the Saudis on women being able to drive, and on getting out from under the medieval restrictions on women's rights in that country. Or who has channeled millions and millions of dollars in grant support to incredibly brave women's rights activists in places like Syria and Iraq and China and Burma, where women risk their lives to do that kind of work. So it's something I feel very, very passionate about. And as a member of Congress, whether it's support for Planned Parenthood, whether it's support for equal pay for equal work, which hopefully we're going to get here in New Jersey under Governor Murphy, and can get on a federal level in legislation that I would support passage, or support for Title IX, or making sure that the U.S. Congress, of all places, doesn't have the worst policies on sexual assault and sexual harassment of almost any major workplace in America. I will be an ally, I will be a supporter. And that's, I think, the best I can do in answering that very, very important question. Sue? Go ahead.
Something I feel like we haven't heard a lot about in the forums and campaign debates is the Second Amendment, gun control. As a parent of school-age children who should be on lockdowns as part of their daily course, right? That's an issue that I and many of my peers are pretty passionate about, but kind of comes back up again and, watch them get shot. So I would just like to hear more about your position about that. And
So the question is guns, gun control. And I spoke briefly up front about the importance of framing issues in the right way. I mean, I'll tell you where I stand. I've defended the U.S. Constitution all my life. The Second Amendment is part of the U.S. Constitution. It's also part of our culture as a country. In this district, it's a big part of the culture, in the western part of the district. We're not going to change that. But the idea that parents have to worry about somebody coming to their school with a military weapon that could kill dozens and dozens of people in a minute in this country in the 21st century, it makes absolutely no sense. And so how do you square that circle? I think the way you do it is by talking about gun safety. I think when we talk about gun control, it triggers a fearful reaction among people for whom gun rights, as they would put it, is their number one issue. But I think most Americans, including a majority of gun owners in America, can come together around a sensible agenda of gun safety. Ideas like universal background checks, like obviously banning bump stocks, for goodness sake, so we can't take a semi-automatic rifle and turn it into a machine like that guy in Las Vegas. Banning high-capacity magazines so that one person cannot kill 50 people in a minute. So that our police officers or law enforcement officers are not out-armed by criminals or by some nut they may encounter at the top of a building shooting. I think, in fact, I know, because the polls tell us, the vast majority of gun owners in America support those kinds of things. And so if we frame it in terms of, we're keeping the Second Amendment, we're not coming after your guns, but we want our kids to be safe, we want our families to be safe, we want our law enforcement officers to be safe, I think we can win that argument. So that's what I intend to try to do.
So, do a little bit of follow-up on that and then back to taxes. What would you say about gun registering firearms?
Registering firearms? You know, I got to register my car. So I think it's something that's worth discussing.
So my perspective on that is that's where you just lost the middle half to not middle half. I really liked where you went with the framing of the argument. I think one of the biggest impediments to meaningful progress on that is the extremes scaring the other side away from the table.
Yeah.
And I think gun registry is probably one of the biggest boogeymen for people on the other side, because that's the first step to taking my guns away. I don't have any guns, by the way. So I was kind of curious where
Yeah, and I think you could tell from the hesitancy of my answer that I hadn't fully thought that.
So unless you're going to sit down with the other side and be credible and act in good faith, where you're not just pretending your end game isn't taking everybody's guns away, we're not going to have any progress. So I appreciate kind of how you frame that. Now back to taxes. People have talked about the tax scam and how this is hurting New Jersey. And that rings a little hollow with me, even. And I know it's going to ring hollow with a good portion of the people in Montgomery Township, but maybe not the ones you count on to vote for you. Bottom line is it is a tax cut, and it's going to be a tax cut for a lot of people, including in New Jersey. But we're not going to know which individuals are affected positively or negatively until next April. And that's only if people go back and put their same numbers for 2017 into the 2017 version of TurboTax and see how they stack up. So I don't find it very credible to pass this tax cut. To me, I think how it was done and how big of a shock it is and the uncertainty is probably something that's going to be more credible with the middle voter and slightly to the right of them. Because, for me, the calculator suggests I'm going to be about a wash. Okay. So, and I do see that it can help small businesses, US-based small businesses. That doesn't mean that it isn't a total giveaway to multinationals. And I think that's probably a better approach to take than decrying the whole thing. Because it is going to offer benefit to a lot of people, from the media on down. And you're going to lose it if you call it a tax cut.
You notice I didn't use that phrase.
I know you did, but
Everybody uses that. I mean, I am attacking it, but I'm trying to make arguments.
Could you repeat that question? I didn't understand.
So the question, can I just...
sure.
So he was cautioning me on how we talk about the tax bill, because as you rightly said, it's complicated. Some people are going to benefit. I mean, it is overall a tax cut. And even if most of the benefits in total go to the very wealthiest segment of society, there are people, even in, middle-income people, even in this state, who, when they do the calculation, will find they may get $100 or $200 in a tax cut. Some people will pay more, some people will pay less. So your caution is be careful how you talk about it, and maybe focus more on the giveaway to corporations. And I'm going to add, let me add to that. So, number one, and also you pointed out the uncertainty of it is something that is also creating a lot of anxiety, because we're not going to know the full impact until next April, which happens to be after the election. So, how do we talk about it? Number one, I would start with the uncertainty and with what people already know or fear to be the case. My mom, who's 79 years old, lives in Princeton, on a cold December day, lined up outside with what she said were like 100 other people that morning to pay her property taxes in advance. I mean, right there. Even if she wasn't a committed Democrat, she'd be lost to this thing. The fact that we are having to go to that length to avoid getting hit hard by the impact of this tax bill.
See, but there you're in dangerous territory, right? Because for me, paying my taxes early was the lottery. I'm going to be without a wash for 2017 probably, and I'm going to get a nice big refund in April because of how this was done. I was able to take advantage of it.
I think, and then let me make a political point, because we can argue the substance of it, but if you look at the politics of it, the polls all show most people think they're going to get screwed by this thing. And in this area, which is why Leonard Lance is running away from it, why Rodney Frelinghuysen is running away from it, why almost every Republican in the Northeast is trying to find some way to wash their hands of this, because they know that it is a political loser right now. Okay? I happen to think substantively it's a loser too, but we know it's a political loser. Now, when I talk about it, I'm not just talking about the immediate hit that people may face when they lose the deductibility of their state and local income taxes and their property taxes. One of the things that I'm focusing on the most is what it does to our national debt. That this, however you get to it, it adds $1.5 trillion at least to our national debt. That our kids are going to have to, either our kids are going to inherit that, or they're going to go after Medicare and Social Security to pay for it. Either way, it is not an economically smart thing to do at a time when the overall economy is doing well. We all know there's going to be a recession, because there always is one eventually. That's when you do a big stimulus like this. We're not going to have any money left in the bank the next time there's a recession. And we know that that $1.5 trillion is not going to pay for infrastructure. It's not going for Gateway. It's not going to improve New Jersey Transit. It's not going to improve our schools. It's not going to pay for free community college so that kids and adults can be retrained throughout their careers to meet the demands of this new economy. It's not being invested in making this country great, in building this country. It is going for something that we largely do not need. That said, we did need tax reform. And that's the second part of my message, which I think it's something we need to say to the people in a district where we got a lot of Republicans and independents who rightly believe that. The Republicans were right. A 35% corporate tax rate is too high. But the right way to lower it is to do what we did when Bill Bradley was our senator in the 1980s, and he worked with Ronald Reagan in a bipartisan way to get tax reform that lowered rates slightly for everybody and paid for it by getting rid of corporate and special income, special interest loopholes and deductions. So it was fiscally responsible. It didn't add to the deficit. It didn't add to the debt. So that's what we would need to do, and it would be my number one priority. And I've been saying, I said at the Somerset Forum, that if I'm elected, after, well, we'll have a party. You're all invited. I'll probably take a weekend off. Please forgive me. But the next thing I'll do is I will call the other freshmen Democratic freshmen, who I hope will have won their seats, to give us a Democratic House of Representatives and say we need to take a weekend off together and come up before we go to Washington with a class of 2018 plan for repealing and replacing the tax bill with something that makes better sense for New Jersey and for the future of this country. And I think that's something we can do. It won't be easy, but I think we can do it.
Well, I was just going to say, how are you going to answer critics who say you just moved here?
I want to be honest about it. Right? If I bullshit people about it, that's never going to know about it. So my answer to that is, I was in Washington for the last 20 years. I was working for a human rights organization and for two great Democratic presidents following my public service career. And I'm proud of it because the work I did there is what can make me an effective congressman for this district from day one. But I'll also say, I grew up here. I was raised here. I went to public school here. This is where I became the person I am. I came back after college and graduate school. And not only that, but unlike Leonard Lance, I will actually vote like I'm from New Jersey. I will vote with the interest of the people of this district in New Jersey in mind, and with the values that I share with the vast majority of them. And at a time when we have a president who's blurting out racist statements every day, going after the FBI, going after our intelligence community, ruining our reputation in the world, risking nuclear war with North Korea, passing a tax bill that's economic malpractice, kicking millions of people off of health care. I honestly think those are the issues people are going to be voting on, and they're going to be looking for someone who stands with them on those issues, and I do it.
You're either a current or a past member of Congress that you would look at and say, that's my role model, and I want to try to act as a congressman like that person?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mentioned Bill Bradley, who I worked for as a high school intern when I was growing up here, and still think was a model of a good public citizen and good public servant. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who remembers Pat Moynihan? Thank you. I worked for him for 2 years right after college, a year and a half. And that was my graduate school. Professor Moynihan was my teacher. Also, I think a model of integrity and intelligence and putting country over party. Which is something. Well, that's true. He skipped House of Representatives. And I would add Rush Holt. Throw in another local favorite, who I know many of you knew as well. And he was, he's kind of soft-spoken like me, but he had a real impact in the Congress, and he stood for the right things and for the right reasons. So those are some of the folks who. Go ahead.
My name is Bruce.
Okay.
The question would be, what happened 2 years ago? In other words, why now? Why not 2 years ago? Again, I missed your introduction, so I don't know where you were before. So because 2 years ago was a good opportunity as well.
So 2 years ago, I was working for President Obama at the circuit. I had no clue I ever doing anything like this. And I had no clue that this would happen, that Trump would happen. I was assuming, like most people were, that we had a different outcome in the last election. And that somehow maybe I'd even be part of that. So, I'm surprised to be here myself. But I'm here because of what happened last November. And because I think the most practical thing that we can do about it is to take back the House of Representatives. And in a way, I think we're really lucky here in the 7th District in New Jersey, because we are among about 5% of the American people who live in a congressional district where we don't know who's going to win. in November. Most people in America live in safe Republican or safe Democratic districts. They know who's going to win. We don't. This is going to be close, which means we are among the very few Americans who, just by voting this November, can determine the fate of this country. We need to flip 24 seats to take back control of the House, which means we can be 1/24th of the solution to what's ailing this country. And that's what I want to be part of. You know, when I wake up and I'm overwhelmed by the bad news, I'm reassured because I know what I have to do. I can be 1/24th. We can be 1/24th of that solution. So that's why I'm here now.
So what can we do? What is it that we need to do to make it happen?
So number one, you got to decide who you want your standard bearer to be, because you've got choices in the Democratic Party. If I can convince you that it should be me, talk to your municipal chair, to your municipal committee people, whether you're in Montgomery or Hillsborough. If you think it should be somebody else, then, you know, maybe go on vacation for a couple of weeks. No, you can still talk to the same people.
So let's say it's you. Okay. So then, what is your plan? I mean, let's say once you get the nomination, then what would you do tomorrow, the next day after?
Well, we're not going to wait. We're not going to wait for that. So there are many things you got to do. Number one, you got to listen to people. And I've been going around the district trying to meet as many people as I possibly can. Right now I'm doing more talking actually because I got to persuade people pretty for me. But if I secure the nomination as I get closer to that, I think I'm going to do a lot more of just gathering people who are not for me, people who may not be Democrats, and just listening. Number two, we got to get our message out to as many people as we possibly can. I'm going to knock on a lot of doors, as many as I can. I'm going to be tired. My feet are going to be tired at the end of this race. But there is no candidate who can knock on all or most of the doors of the people in this big suburban rural congressional district. We're going to need to communicate through cable TV, through social media. We're going to need to get free media as much as we possibly can. And this is the part that's not as inspiring. It's going to cost a lot of money. I'm told it's going to cost $5, $6, $7, even $8 million to run a credible, effective campaign in this district. And I know the Republicans are going to pour that kind of money in this district because they want to defend Lance. And so we're going to need somebody who can raise a lot of that money on their own so that we can persuade the Democratic Party around the country to chip in the rest. And that's something that I've been doing pretty well in comparison to some of the other candidates. And then we're going to need all of you to be our captains in the communities where you live. Talking to your neighbors, talking to your friends, writing postcards to everybody you know, making phone calls. The people, when you are knocking on doors, there's two people who normally do not get the door shut in their face. And that is the candidate and people's neighbors. And so if you're with me, I'm going to ask you to talk to all your neighbors when it comes down to it. And I'll make the same request of everybody else.
I realize that District 7 is a large district. Why is it, I mean, going from Westfield all the way back to Montgomery? I mean, it's huge. Is there a reason for that?
Is there a reason for it? Oh. Well, one answer is every district is the same size and population. This district, it's got a lot of different parts that don't normally fit together, right? And it is the result of, I think most people would say, a gerrymandering compromise. And this district was gerrymandered to be Republican. And it's been Republican for 37 years. The congressman has been Republican for that long. But it's changing in ways that the map drawers didn't maybe count on when they last drew the map. So we still have Leonard Lance as our congressman, but Hillary Clinton won this district in 2016. It's very much like other parts of the country, suburban, relatively affluent districts that are moving in our direction. So even though it's gerrymandered to be that way, it doesn't have to be that way, and it won't be that way in 2018 if we have our act together.
We have one more question.
Question out there, right, about who's just moved here. My concern is that not only will it be other people saying, oh, you can move back, but that the Republican criticism will be that this is a TNC person, that the outside money that you're talking about successfully across this district rather than as people of local Democratic municipalities, but like it's not going to play with the public, right? Like it's going to be like, okay, nasty.
Not just the public.
Hold on. So, like that, I just want to know more about how you're going to address that, because I do think that will be a criticism levied at you, right? Like they're just going to sink in these national DNC dollars. He's not a carpetbagger, and that's going to come from the Republican side, not from just like people who live here. You know, they're going to levy that attack publicly.
So,
Could you repeat the question? People over here didn't hear it.
question?
Yeah.
So she's saying, so she's saying rightly that the Republicans are going to come after me for being, carpetbagger, for, recently moved back here, and that's inevitable, and I totally agree. And also, if I raise money from outside the district, they're going to say, oh, it's the DNC, it's the, Nancy Pelosi. You didn't utter that, but yeah, they'll say that too. And all that's true. Part of my answer I gave you before, which is, look at Lance. He's lived here all his life, and he's represented this district almost all his life in the state legislature, in the Congress, and he votes like he's from Mars. So come on, give me a break. In terms of money from outside, this has actually come up even kind of in the Democratic whispering. I've heard people saying, we heard Tom was sent by the DNC, he was sent by Washington to come and run here. So if any of you have heard that, let me take this opportunity to say it is absolutely not true. The only person who had the crazy idea that I should run for Congress in this district was me at the beginning. And when I told my friends, they were like, huh? And when I first time the GCCC, which is the House Democrats fundraising arm, the first time they ever heard of me was when I walked into their office to say, I'm thinking about this, what do you think? And what they told me was, sure, we'll tell you what we tell anybody. Here's what you'd have to do to prove that you're a viable candidate for Congress. And number one on their list, again, I know this isn't very inspiring, but number one on their list was, can you raise $500,000 in your first quarter? Because we haven't seen anyone else in the 7th District do that. So if you can do that, then maybe you'll pique our interest. So I thought about it, I decided to do it, and now I've piqued their interest. And so, yeah, it is true that there are folks in the Democratic Party in Washington who are really excited about our campaign, and that's because of what we've been able to achieve on our own. And when it comes to next fall, hell yes, we will be trying to get a lot of financial support, not just from within the district, but from outside. All of the sister district stuff, where people who are living in safe Democratic seats around the country, those people, we will be asking them to donate to us. And if Republicans have the nerve to accuse us of doing that, I'm sorry. They're going to be doing the same thing. Because do you know who the weakest fundraiser among vulnerable Republicans in the Congress is, in the country? It's Leonard Lance. So come this summer, he's going to have his begging bowl out to all the special interest corporate PACs here and around the country, and to the Republican National Committee, saying, please, Malinowski's coming after me, you've got to help. And they'll do it because they're still rich, right? So, give me a break. There will be millions of dollars of national Republican and conservative money coming into this district because he's going to have a serious challenger this year, hopefully me. And so, you know, I don't think that's going to cut it today.
But what's wrong with that for the DNC to be involved?
I'm not saying it's wrong with it, I'm saying that if
They'll say it.
criticism that's
Okay.
gonna say it, I want to hear how you're gonna address it. That was it. I'm not, it's not me making that criticism, yeah.
I mean, my perspective is it.
Oh, I just want to ask one last question. What's your approach or whatever to the down ballot races? Like in Montgomery, we're gonna have 2 more people running and the freeholders, and you know, I did feel like Murphy gave a lot of effort and support to the down ballot races. So what would your approach be to that?
So we want to run a really, truly coordinated campaign that's actually coordinated. So like one experience I had, I was canvassing year by year for the LD16 candidates. And I had the experience that a lot of canvassers told me about, where I'd knock on the door and they'd say, oh, somebody was here 2 hours ago. And it was like paid canvassers for the Murphy campaign. So, number one, we want to be really coordinated with you guys at the municipal level so that we are pulling together in an efficient way. We are actually pooling our resources and not competing. Number two, the resources that we raise are going to benefit down ballot candidates. So one of the things that we're really going to emphasize, and that is expensive to do right, is vote by mail. And I may be doing it because I want people to vote for me, but it's going to benefit every single Democratic candidate if we work together to identify people who we think would vote Democratic if they only came out to the polls, but maybe are less likely to come out on a Tuesday night in November, but might if we make it easier for them to vote by mail. If I'm lucky enough to get the support of Somerset County, first thing we're going to do is get with the municipal chairs, municipal committees. Colston Reed, my campaign manager, is already meeting a lot of you guys to put together exactly that kind of plan. We want to be doing that. We want to start talking about it in March. We want to start identifying people at the precinct level who are going to have not just the motivation, because they already have it, but the training and the support to be able to do a real grassroots, locally based field effort. And that's going to benefit local candidates as well as hopefully me. So that's the beginning of an answer. But if you want the real professional answer, talk to Colston, because he knows far, far better than me how to run the nuts and bolts of it. Alrighty?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.